This week on the Hollywood in Toto podcast, Whoopi Goldberg takes Trump Derangement Syndrome to a whole new level. It's a work of art, a masterpiece even, truly. We talk with the director of a new film called Lost on a Mountain in Maine. Yes, the title says it all, but the real story is about the filmmaking legend who took a pretty sizable role in making this all possible. And I fess up about why there was no show last week. Honesty is the best policy, right? Well, I got to be honest with you. Things are changing behind the scenes here. I'll say more in a minute.
Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast. Entertainment news and reviews without the woke Hollywood narrative. Free speech, free expression. Now that's entertainment. And here's your host, award-winning film critic, Christian Toto.
A few years ago, I used to do a weekly radio segment with Michael Brown here in Denver. You don't know Michael Brown? What about Heck of a Job Brownie? Yeah, that's the same guy. And he certainly got a bad rap during the Katrina days, but I got to know him as this really smart, thoughtful, savvy about pop culture guy who was kind enough to invite me into his radio station once a week for quite a while. And we would talk pop culture, review new movies, have a good time. And of course, more than often, we would make fun of The View. Now, again, this is pre-COVID. So back in the day, The View was just dumb, silly, ridiculous at times. I call them the good old days because you know The View today, it's really crazy. It's bat bleep crazy. And that's on a good day. So, thinking back on those old days, I don't know if I would have as much fun with the segment as I did back in those pre-COVID days with Michael Brown. I feel like the stakes are a bit higher now. The crazy level keeps rising. It used to be fun to laugh at the show, to enjoy how silly it all was. I don't know. It's landing to me a little bit differently, which leads me to this week's clip with Whoopi Goldberg. Now, Whoopi once upon a time was actually the more sane member of the View panel. Listen, she was always left of center. She might have some eccentric ideas, but she'd often bring things back to reality. She seemed like she had lived a very colorful life, and she had just enough common sense to make the show go down just a tiny bit smoother. Well, those days are gone. This new, not so improved Whoopi Goldberg is a mess, a disaster. And she's shrieking and caterwauling on the set in a way that seems like someone behind the scenes should say, "Excuse me, Miss Goldberg, I know you have an Oscar. I know you're a legend in your space, but this isn't working." Or, "We've got to maybe dial things back a bit." Or, "Are you insane?"
Sweetie, this is crazy.
That's the level we're at right now. Now, you could say, well, I'm building up this clip because what could be as ludicrous as what I'm about to share? And you could say, oh, you want clicks and you want downloads. And yeah, I do want clicks and I do want downloads, but I think this clip merits all this attention and all this buildup. See if you agree.
All of you. Talking about you, it's us. He's not going to, say, oh, you're with a white guy, I'm going to keep you from being deported. No, he's going to deport you and put the white guy with someone else. The man is out there.
Your Honor, I rest my case. Now, in recent weeks, we've seen a lot of just crazy talk attached to a possible second Trump term. Mika Brzezinski comes to mind. There's been just unbelievable statements coming out of these highly paid professionals. It's embarrassing. And hopefully after the election dust settles, we can have some time to reassess how we present ourselves in the public and what we say to the masses when we have these really powerful broadcasting platforms. But for now, it feels safe to say that I don't think that Whoopi Goldberg can sink any lower than what she sank with this comment. I really don't. But then again, there's always tomorrow, and it is The View. And as they've shown us time and again, anything is possible. Keep reaching for the stars, Whoopi. We'll be there, ready for it. Does anyone know an underdog story better than Sylvester Stallone? Back in the 70s, he was an aspiring actor and writer, and He wanted to make movies, he wanted to bring his stories to the big screen, but not so easy. He got some people's attention with the script for Rocky. They didn't want him to be Rocky. They wanted a big star, not this unnamed guy. Who's this? Who's Sylvester Stallone? He's a nobody. You got to install a star in a movie like this. Then you could sell some tickets. But of course, Stallone persevered. He wouldn't do it without actually being in the film himself. The rest is history. He became a star and then a superstar. And I think he still is. Have you seen Tulsa King recently? Very good show. We still love Sylvester Stallone on the big screen and now the small screen. And he also wants to tell more stories like Rocky, and probably one of the reasons why he started Balboa Productions. It's his production shingle where he can make stories that align with his cinematic values. And I think his newest film really does match up with those intentions. It's called Lost on a Mountain in Maine, and it's a true story based on a little boy, 12 years old, who was isolated and all alone on a mountain in Maine. Yeah, spoiler alert.
There she is, Mount Katahdin.
We're gonna hike that?
Sure. You're almost men now. Don, slow down.
You want us to be men? Then let us be men. We don't need you. We're going to the tower.
And the story itself took place in the late 1930s. And why, oh, why has it taken so long to get to the big screen? It just seems like a natural for a story of its kind. Inspirational, father and son bonds. A lot of interesting themes are explored here. The good news is that it is finally on screens, at least starting November 1st. You can check it out then. And I have the director of the film on the show to share his side of the story, how it was made, working with Stallone's production company, and so much more. Now, Andrew Kightlinger has got a really fascinating background, which he'll share in the start of this conversation. But I think it made him a better storyteller. I think it really imparted some visual style in his mind because you can see it on the screen. So here's my conversation with Andrew. The story is pretty remarkable, but it's how he told the story that matters, and also his approach to working with Balboa Productions, which you'll find out in a minute. So I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Andrew. And if you're like me, I think you're going to want to see the movie and then check out what else he has in mind. I think he's a young storyteller who's someone you want to have on your radar. Trust me.
Yes.
Andrew, thank you for joining the show. Before we get into the movie, I want to just get a little glimpse at your early days, your childhood. I know you've been, it's not the traditional childhood, but I also wonder if the kind of adventures you went on and the life you led as a young boy, did that lead to your cinematic journey? Because I suspect watching the movie, you have a wonderful eye. I just kind of want to maybe put some pieces together for me.
Thank you. Yeah, my childhood, I was born and raised in Madagascar. I was the son of Lutheran missionaries. And yeah, like you're surrounded by some of the most beautiful terrain on the planet. Like Madagascar is known for its very unique flora and fauna. It's very unique topography. Some of it is native only to that island. So I was kind of raised in a very epic landscape. And then when I was 12, my father, who's originally from South Dakota, we moved to South Dakota. So I traded one wilderness for another, and all of a sudden I was in the American West, which is another epicness. So I think I carried that over into my visual style. But I also don't forget the human
Mhm.
cost and the human soul that's that's inside of that. And I always say that the horizon is both a very inspiring and belittling thing. It reminds you that you're human. So I try to capture that in movies, and I definitely tried to bring that to this film as well.
When you think about the original story, obviously based on a true tale, it's the late 1930s, I believe. Why hasn't this been brought to the screen before? It's such a natural. I'm glad you did it and it did so well, but has this been kind of kicking around for a while? The concept, why did it take so long for this remarkable story to make the journey to the big screen?
It has, and it's been around for about 30 years. People have been trying to make this into a movie,
Mhm.
and obviously, it's a true story. 1939 is when it happened,
Mhm.
and the book that Don Fendler wrote after he survived this ordeal became a kind of a seminal movie or a seminal book, sorry,
Mhm.
for kids in New England to read. Um, and it wasn't until it got to Sylvester Stallone's doorstep that the movie took on a life of its own, because Sylvester obviously is, one of the original underdogs in a way, Rocky. And yeah, I think he loves stories about the triumph of the human spirit. and perseverance. And he saw an opportunity to tackle that subject again, but around a child. And
Yeah.
and I think it took a while for this to come out because people just don't make movies like this anymore.
Hmm.
I think, I tried to make a movie like the ones I used to watch in the 80s, like White Fang or an Old Yeller or, The Black Stallion, and we just don't get those. And so this is kind of a throwback to that.
Why is, I mean, do you get the sense throughout this whole journey, why is that? I mean, it seems like a natural, you appeal to a younger demographic. I think parents like myself are thinking, gosh, imagine my son or my daughter, suffering through this. It seems like a slam dunk. Is it just sort of Hollywood has a certain groupthink in mind where it's sequels and superheroes and they
I
can't even
think that's
imagine
exactly
something
it.
beyond this?
I think that's exactly it. I think they get caught up in their own marketing machine and their own money machine.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they don't know that audiences are hungry for something else, or maybe something old that can be new again, which is kind of what we try to do here. The reason I made this movie was because I think the themes are really basic, but in a very good way. It is about hope, it's about family, it's about perseverance, a community. And I think those are things that you don't see in movies that much anymore because movies are often very cynical now, I find.
Yeah.
And, they're trying to wink at you too much. So I wanted to make something pure and bring that back to the big screen.
Stallone is, I think, 78 now, and he's been famous forever and successful forever. And I think that doesn't happen by accident. Obviously, he's talented, but I think he has a sense of what audiences want. I'm curious, does he have a hand in this directly? Is it sort of his production company and that they kind of follow his DNA? Is there involvement there? Anything you can share in that regard?
Absolutely. I love you to use the word DNA. I think that's exactly right. This is Stallone's DNA is all over this project. But what's nice about him as a collaborator, and they're there every step of the way. Like this is their thing.
Yeah.
Um, he was very supportive, but also refreshingly hands off. People forget
Mm.
because he is an icon and he's almost
Yeah.
transcended in a way that he was an artist and that
Mhm.
he is an artist and he started. Rocky was a character drama, and he was a nobody that nobody believed in, and he made this movie, and it took the world by storm. So I think that is definitely part of the narrative, and they were there every step of the way and very supportive, and he is rubber stamped the movie.
What I found so interesting about the movie is obviously the story is the hook itself, but the father and son dynamic is so fascinating here because this is a father of the era. This is the 1930s. This is a different kind of patriarch. And he could be a little more aloof. He could be a little bit more cold based on how we think about things today. And yet there's still this deep, deep love between father and son. Can you share a little bit about that? I just found that so interesting. And I'm thinking you could set the movie today and it would work and be wonderful. But having it then, there was something extra, and it really was
Thank
magical to
you.
me.
Thank you so much. That was definitely at the forefront of my mind the whole time we were making it, and
Mm,
also it's what appealed to me about the script when I first read it was that father-son relationship. I have a great relationship with my dad, so I wasn't
mm,
pulling from personal experience, but I thought the conflict between these two people who just really want to say that they love each other, and they
mhm.
just can't bring themselves to do it
Yeah,
because they think the world is asking him to behave a certain way.
yeah,
I just thought that was extremely compelling, and the movie takes place, and the real story took place right before Germany invaded Poland. So it's also in a place where this parent is thinking about preparing their child for the world ahead, and they're
yeah,
scared about what's to come. And I hear that chatter a lot now with all my friends today thinking of having kids or having kids. The world is, there's a
mhm,
lot of noise right now. And so but I think placing it
mm,
in another era in the past is actually a better access point for people today to relate to it. Because if you're just showing it now and doing it contemporary, I think people will kind of divorce, like, ah, no, I don't want to hear about that now. But they go, oh, this has
yeah,
happened before, and maybe I should treat my kid with a little more empathy, you know?
yeah. Another thing that I think on paper I would have guessed wouldn't work, but I thought it worked beautifully, was using actual clips of the people directly involved with the situation. Obviously, it's archival, but along the way, the movie stops to share these little true life snippets, bits of interviews. Was that were you as? It seems risky to me. I think it paid off, but what was your thought process there, and were you a little nervous about using that approach?
I was, that archival footage was used to write the script initially. It was a
Mm,
trove of like 45 hours of documentary footage we had, and it helped fill out. the script and all those things. And then it was only in the post-production process and editing that we thought, why should people care about this movie? And this story in particular. And we found it that it was a way to ground the movie and to remind people that this unbelievable story, because there's some beats in this movie that could seem unbelievable, like
Mhm.
kind of like almost like too Hollywood, but they actually happened. And
Yeah.
so this footage kind of leads the audience there. And I wasn't too nervous about it because one of my favorite movies is Warren Beatty's Reds, which I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's a great
Mhm.
movie about the Bolshevik Revolution. And he used that same tactic in it.
Mhm.
And so I thought to myself, well, the movie was nominated for many Oscars and it worked. So I was like,
Yeah.
let's try that here. And so I found a way to ground the movie and just use that archival footage as chapter headings. And yeah, and I'm very happy with
Yeah.
it.
Obviously, this is not a $200 million production. You've got to be careful. You've got to kind of weigh different things and maybe even improvise on the fly. I'm kind of curious, looking back at the production, were there any happy accidents that came about as you maybe the weather made it impossible to do this and you kind of compensated that way and it actually worked out better? Any little stories from behind the scenes?
Yeah, without getting to too much spoiler territory, the movie does get quite metaphysical near the end.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of that was initially much larger in scope.
Yeah.
And obviously, because of the budget and, things happen and you have to squeeze a little bit, I was forced with the cinematographer, who was brilliant, to come up with the technique. I don't think this is too much of a spoiler. The kid kind of
Mhm.
gets a taste of the afterlife, right? Um, and I decided just to go back to the times of Hitchcock. What would have Hitchcock would have done? Or when they had less resources, and it's all just in camera, and we use practical effects. And I actually think it's the better choice because I think it really grounds the movie. If all of a sudden you had this flurry of special effects in the film, sure, it would have been beautiful, but I think people would have detached from it emotionally. So that's one of those happy accidents. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe take a step back here, not just about the movie, but you're a young filmmaker. You've got a growing resume. Hollywood is so different now than it was 10, 20 years ago. There are so many different platforms you can be on. There's so much technology that as an indie filmmaker type, you can access you never could before. And yet there's so much competition. It's so easy to get lost in the shuffle. Are you optimistic about making movies down the road? Are you pessimistic? Is it a collision of the
It's
two?
a
Where do you think?
Whew, that's a big question because
Yeah.
we're coming out of COVID, we're coming out of two strikes.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends are very pessimistic, but I
Mhm.
believe that there will always stories are as old as time,
Mhm.
and cinema, which is a very young art form, right? We've only been around for 100 years or more, right? Is still evolving and figuring itself out, and the movie theater is such a wonderful place to have a communal experience with other people that are total strangers. And so I think there will always be a hunger for it. And me, like personally, I want to tell artful stories that are broad and appealing to
Mhm.
mass audiences, and I think there will always be a place for that. Um, and so as long as people like my perspective
Mhm.
and can appreciate that I'm maybe too positive for my own good, I think that's a strength. Um,
Yeah.
I think I'll have a place in this industry.
Gotcha. When you think about the film itself, you mentioned some of the scenes or some of the moments were almost too good to be true, almost like it was a Hollywood script, but it actually happened. Were there any beats from the real life story that you actually took out? Because I don't think audiences are going to buy this.
I don't think we took, oh, well, we didn't take anything out. What we did is we embellished.
Mhm.
Um, there were certain moments that were just sort of dry in the real life version of it, because it's
Mhm.
life. Sometimes it's dry. Even though this is an extraordinary tale, there's some details like not very dramatic. So
Yeah.
I guess an example would be when the kid gets lost on the mountain in a storm. Usually in the real story, his brother's not there with him. But
Mhm.
I saw an opportunity because I do see this as a family tale. I saw an
Yeah.
opportunity to also tell the story of these two siblings that are also very different and at odds with each other. And so that separation is not just a force majeure event of the weather, it's also an emotional climax of these
Yeah.
two brothers clashing. So I took liberties there, and Yeah, and also like the book has a bear. That's going to be something I think purists are going to be like, "Where's the bear?" And the movie doesn't have a bear in it. But fun anecdote. You asked me like, happy accidents. This is more just a fun thing. Like, did you know that to rent a bear, like a professional bear that's not going to kill everybody on set, costs $50,000 a day, 50
Wow.
grand a day to rent an actor bear. So that was one of those things we just had to say, no, we're
Yeah.
going to sacrifice the bear. And I said, as much as I want spectacle in the film, for me, the
Mhm.
focus is the heart of the story, that
And I
father-son
think you don't want to
relationship.
kind of cheap out on the bear because if you buy the third-rate bear,
No,
you might have some consequences.
no, we almost got a guy in a bear costume to come up and do it. And I was like, we can't, no, we're better than that.
When you think about this film, it's perfect for young children, not like toddlers, but preteens. I
Yeah,
think they're
yeah.
going to connect to it in a very visceral way. And yet the film is not inappropriate for them, but it's tough. I mean, there are tough scenes, there are emotional scenes. Yeah, talk about that balance where you're not making it grisly, it's not R-rated, it's not inappropriate. At the same time, it doesn't really, it doesn't soften the blow of what the missing, the absence could be, the chances could be, the harrowing of the parents. How do you kind of work that kind of
Yeah. I mean, like I said, this is a movie that doesn't get made anymore. The movies I grew up with, like The Black Stallion, or or dare I say, like The Land Before Time, or All Dogs Go to Heaven. These are movies that were kind of scary and dealt with death and grief and all these things and loss. And I feel like movies coddle kids a bit too much. And when I meet a child, I'm not a parent myself, but I have lots of friends. I'm an uncle to many. And I always just treat them like adults, and I feel like they respond to me better that way. And I treated the
Yeah.
kids on this movie like adults. I define my inner child a bit. So for me, I think that kids need to learn about these things and they need to talk about them with their parents. And I wanted to make a movie that was multifaceted, where kids will
Mhm.
go, they'll be in awe of the adventure. I think every kid kind of wants to get lost at some point, right? But then the parents will also go and think about their own parenting styles and maybe what they've done wrong or what they're doing right, and afterwards have a discussion about all that. Yeah, I don't think that kids, it's a PG rated family adventure,
Mhm.
and I think those movies can also. E.T. is a tough movie, right?
Yeah. Oh
And
gosh.
yeah, E.T. is a tough movie, and
Mhm.
as a kid, it terrified me, but
Hmm.
it also filled me with awe, and it was also very inspirational. And that's what I wanted to do, was make a movie like that.
I know your job right now is to kind of spread the word about this movie, but before I let you go, are you working on other projects, other things that are on the tip of your tongue? What's next for you as a storyteller?
As much as I'm trying to enjoy the release of this film, I can never not be working on stuff. So I'm writing a lot and I'm fielding a couple things, and I hope to be shooting my next movie in 2025, and it will be very different from this one.
Uh-huh.
I also try to be multifaceted.
Excellent. Well, the new movie is Lost on a Mountain in Maine. It comes out November 1st. Do check it out. Bring the family. I think everyone will really appreciate the values here, the lessons, the hope, and the conflict. There's a lot to chew on in your film, Andrew. So thank you so much for your time, and
Thanks
I'm
for
looking
having
forward
me.
to talking about your next project. I know it's maybe a couple of years away, but you're a storyteller to watch, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. I really appreciate love this discussion. Great questions. Thank you.
Well, we didn't have a hit cast last week, and I do apologize, and that's why I wanted to get a little frank with you because having some trouble behind the scenes here. Nothing technical, no sort of personal issues. Everything is fine on my end. But boy, the amount of work, the workload I'm enduring right now, it's a bit tricky. Now, I've been running HollywoodInToto.com for 10 years now. This was his 10-year anniversary. And I love it. And I'm amazed I'm able to create the site, keep it alive, update it daily. And the fact that it's basically the cornerstone of my career. I couldn't be more grateful. But I also write for the Daily Wire. I contribute to The Blaze. I do some work for Newsbusters, justthenews.com. In addition to this podcast, which of course shifted from audio to video in recent weeks. And I'm sure some of you are saying, yeah, we could tell it's a little rough around the edges. I get it, hoping to improve week by week. But also, to do all these different things isn't really enough because you have to promote your work. You have to reach out and get these interviews. You've got to work social media to get the news out there, to spread the word about what you're doing, to be conversational on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. And boy, I can't wait till we can stop saying that at some point. But it's exhausting. I just was wiped out. And in addition, last week, I actually traveled to West Palm Beach. I was at Mar-a-Lago. I think you've heard of that particular locale. It was for the premiere of a new film called Line in the Sand. It's
We got an unaccompanied minor right here, guys. This is heartbreaking right here.
See the handcuffs? Those criminals are being put with the kids?
Yep.
They're putting the criminals with the kids.
It's a documentary from James O'Keefe. He has teamed up with Tucker Carlson to bring it to the masses. And what James O'Keefe does, which is basically what he always does, he goes undercover. He tells the stories that need to be told. He does things that other journalists just refuse to do and exposes the corruption and the rot that's going on at the U.S.-Mexico border. Film is highly recommended. Enjoyed my time on the red carpet. Spoke to people like James O'Keefe and others as well. Even Marla Maples, by the way, who had some really kind things to say about Donald Trump, of all people. But for all these reasons, we didn't have a show last week. And I'm just really trying to recalibrate my career, what I need to do, the work I can put aside for now. I really want this show to be weekly. I want to have more and more video production coming on my YouTube channel. I want to just go all in. And to do that, there's going to be some changes behind the scenes. I don't think you'll see any of it, but I just want to be transparent about what's going on, why there was a week off, with my full apologies, and just say, this ain't easy. It really isn't. You know, being an independent journalist, being someone working without a significant platform behind me, I'm just making it up as I go along. I think I've been successful. I think I've been really happy with how things have turned out, but it's been a massive learning experience every step of the way. And I have the support of my wife and family, which I adore, and I'm ever so grateful for. So there it is. I don't plan on taking any more weeks off. We might have a break for Christmas. That's about it. But the plan is to keep moving forward, keep getting new episodes out, keep bringing you really good interviews of people you're going to want to hear from, and also keep holding Hollywood accountable. They do some wonderful things, they do some terrible things, and some things in between. But there are very few right-of-center voices who are willing to hold them accountable, and at the same time, give them an attaboy when they're doing the job well. Well, that's it for this week's show. Again, thank you for letting me be a little bit more honest and open about the situation behind the scenes here. I love the show. I'm glad I've transferred this show to video and not just audio, depending on where you're listening to it. You can always check it out on YouTube and Rumble, in addition to all the usual podcast platforms. But yeah, this is quite a journey. I'm glad I ended 2024 by making the switch, and bigger and brighter things are ahead, I promise you. But thank you for your patronage. Thank you for checking out the show and telling a friend. And I'll see you all next time.